Every headstone tells a story. Behind each name is a life once lived and lost. As we mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day, we remember not only the end of war but the beginning of a promise that those who died would not be forgotten. This is the story of how that promise was kept. Before the First World War, there was no official system to mark the graves of the fallen. In conflicts like the Crimean and Boer Wars, soldiers were often buried quickly on the battlefield in mass graves. They were unmarked and their names unrecorded. Only in rare cases, typically for officers of high rank or from wealthy families, were bodies returned home. But in 1914, with the outbreak of the Great War, this all changed. One man, Sir Fabian Ware, believed that every soldier, regardless of rank or class, deserved to be remembered. At 45, Fabian Ware was considered too old for military service. But driven by patriotism, he wanted to volunteer and joined the Red Cross Mobile Ambulance Unit on the Western Front. There, among the mud and carnage, he noticed something. No one was recording where the dead were buried. Recognizing the importance of this, he began documenting graves himself, creating a register of names and locations, and then he contacted higher authorities. What began as one man's mission soon gained official recognition. In 1915, the War Office agreed that his mobile ambulance unit should be changed into a dedicated team for burying the dead, and they were transferred from the Red Cross to the British Army and became known as the Graves Registration Commission. On the 21st of May, 1917, George V created a royal charter to establish the Imperial War Graves Commission. The Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, was the president, and Sir Fabian Ware was made vice president. Fabian's unit put themselves in danger day after day to find, identify, record and bury as accurately as possible. Ware believed remembrance should be permanent and equal. Officers and privates, Catholics and Jews, Christians and Muslims, buried side by side. All remembered the same, and he was not alone. Among his strongest supporters were the Prince of Wales and the writer Rudyard Kipling. Each of them, in their own way, knew loss. Many grieving families wanted to bring their loved ones home, but repatriating bodies was expensive and logistically impossible during an ongoing war. In a time when the gap between social classes was vast, the Commission made a controversial but essential decision. The war dead would remain where they fell. No one would be privileged in death. This equality in burial, so radical at the time, became a cornerstone of the Commission's philosophy. When the Great War ended on the 11th of November 1918, the mammoth task of commemorating the fallen across the globe began. Temporary wooden crosses marked the places of the fallen, but now many had to be exhumed and placed in the beautiful cemeteries being designed. This was an extremely sensitive subject, as you can imagine. It was too painful for some families to know this would happen. The Commission enlisted the greatest minds of the era to design the cemeteries. Sir Edwin Lutyens, who also designed the Cenotaph Memorial in Whitehall, London, along with Sir Herbert Baker, and Charles Holden together, shaped spaces of dignity and peace. Arthur Hill, the director of the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew, was the Commission's first botanical advisor. The principles were clear. All of the headstones were to be the same regardless of rank. Each headstone bore the soldier's name, rank, regiment, age and date of death. The families, where contactable, were able to choose if they would like a short inscription at the bottom and a symbol showing the person's religion. Kipling's only son was killed at the Battle of Loos in 1915, and his body was never found. Kipling poured his grief into supporting the Commission, becoming its literary advisor. He chose many of the inscriptions that appear on the headstones, even writing the phrase "known unto God" for the unknown soldiers and for the stone of remembrance. Their name liveth for evermore. As there was a lot of anger from the public, Kipling was also asked to write an article which outlined the proposal for the war grave cemeteries, detailing the layout, what the headstones would look like, and the reasons why repatriation couldn't occur. It was initially printed as an article in the Times newspaper in 1919, but was quickly republished as an illustrated leaflet. Some bodies, unfortunately, were never recovered, and to this day approximately 100 war dead are uncovered yearly worldwide. One fascinating story involves Eric Francis Seaforth Hayter, a 25-year-old who served in the 87th Battery, Howitzer, of the RFA. On the 21st of March 1918, Eric was on the front line near Lagnicourt. After running out of ammunition and being unable to retreat, all but 4 of the artillerymen, including Eric, sadly lost their lives. A report from one of the survivors explained what happened. Second Lieutenant Hayter was during this time wounded on the face and had a part of his right hand shot away, but continued to hearten his men and would not hear of giving in. He was known to have said more than once previously that the Germans should never take him prisoner, and they certainly did not do so, because when they were coming within pistol range he deliberately stood out, revolver in his left hand, and by gesture invited the Germans to come on and take him, but this they had no intention of doing, for they shot him through the head with a rifle bullet. Eric's grave was not accounted for, but in 1919 the family received a hand-drawn map from a German soldier showing the place where Eric was buried. This was passed on to the Imperial War Graves Commission, but there was no record of a grave there. For years after, his father Colonel Hayter was told that it was possible that an unknown soldier found a mile away could be his son, but he was not convinced as Eric had had dental work, and this soldier didn't have gold crowns. In the following couple of years, he visited the sites in the hope that he would find Eric, but he wasn't successful. In 1923, Colonel Hayter accepted that it was unlikely that he would ever find him, and he decided to buy a piece of land near to the place on the map to erect a memorial for his son. He wasn't actually able to buy the piece of land that he wanted, so he settled on a piece of ground a few yards away. But in a strange coincidence, when the contractor broke ground for the foundations, he came across a body. Amazingly, the body could be identified as that of Second Lieutenant Hayter due to the presence of the gold fillings and badges of rank. The memorial was maintained by the family until 1969. By this time, there were no living relatives remaining, and the memorial has now been incorporated in the Lagnicourt Hedge Cemetery. Even though the war dead could not be repatriated, you will still find thousands of Commonwealth war graves right here in the United Kingdom. That's because the Commission's commitment extended beyond the battlefield. Anyone who was in service during the war was commemorated, regardless of where they died. If a soldier went home on leave and died of natural causes, or if they were injured and later died a few years later in hospital, they were still remembered. From remote village churchyards to large city cemeteries, these war graves remind us that sacrifice wasn't limited to the front line. By 1938, after 2 decades of painstaking work, the cemeteries and memorials of the First World War were finally completed. It had taken immense effort, international cooperation, and deep compassion. But just 1 year later, the world was at war again. Sadly, with the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, once more names were recorded, cemeteries were planned, and memorials were built. And once more, the Commission kept its solemn vow that every sacrifice would be honoured, no matter when, where, or how it occurred. Today, more than a century later, that promise lives on. The Imperial War Graves Commission, renamed the Commonwealth War Graves Commission in 1960, now cares for over 1.7 million commemorations across 23,000 locations in more than 150 countries and continues to uphold the values set out by Ware and his colleagues. From the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Southeast Asia, each site is immaculately preserved. The CWGC employs over 1,300 staff, gardeners, masons, historians, and technicians who care for these sites year-round. Technology has been a huge help enabling digital records, satellite mapping, and DNA testing to continue to identify missing soldiers and connect families to lost relatives. What began with one man's notebook in the mud on the Western Front became a global commitment to memory. Fabian Ware, the Prince of Wales, Rudyard Kipling, and many others, didn't just change how we remember the fallen, they ensured we never stop. 80 years after victory in Europe, we remember not only those who gave their lives, but those who dedicated themselves to preserving their memory. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to explore more stories from history. Thank you for watching. See you next time.